Cheng Lei, welcome.
Thank you so much.
You've come to Sydney today for the first time. What was that like?
Well, flying into Melbourne the day I was released, I didn't actually get to see the view because I was sitting in the middle. But today, taking off from Melbourne, it was the first time I'd seen the horizon from the air. And you try so hard and for so long to imagine what the horizon looks like. And, you know, when as far as the eye could see is not really that far, is not even as far as your legs could run. And then to see this huge endlessness of ground below me, I was just visually and emotionally pummeled. I was a teary mess.
And is that just land, just the open land as opposed to a cell, or is it also because it's Australia and home?
Both, definitely. I'd been so homesick, and sky, trees, horizon, those are the things that you miss the most in a cell for so long. So I think my seatmate must have wondered what was wrong with me crying on a domestic flight.
And it's been a few days. Do you feel safe in your freedom yet?
I feel safe, but also, I guess, a lot of emotional fluctuation. For example, when my son says that he and his sister were worried that their conversations would be tapped, they made up a code word for certain things. And I just found that at the same time cute, but incredibly sad that this sort of thinking has permeated even my children. So I will try to be as positive and as strong as I can for them.
Do you think you can begin to understand yet the impact of what happened to you on them?
It was a subject that was very painful for me while in incarceration. I worried that they would be scarred for life. But I'm seeing a lot of good things as well because of the support and such warmth from the schools and their friends and teachers. My son has grown up to be a very friendly, outgoing, funny kid. And he feels accepted, and he's taken that atmosphere of tolerance and of love even onto himself, which is great.
Do you talk to them yet about the incarceration and being without them, or do you not talk about it yet?
Oh, I'm all for communication and expression. I tell them what it was like, I make jokes, I cry, and then my children will hug me, which is so sweet. I think by getting things out, for example, by appearing on your show, it helps the healing process.
And you said you feel safe, but you said your son, your children invented code words. Do you still find those reflexes in yourself? It's only been a very short time.
A little. I think the reflex was always someone was going to tell me that I'm doing something wrong and that there would be consequences. So even enjoying things, I feel a little bit fearful that I might be taken away and bad things might happen again.
Just go back to that period before your arrest. As an Australian citizen, did you feel that you were safe from the reach of the state security apparatus?
I always thought by being a business reporter, I was quite safe. And I was very blasé, and even boasted to other people that because I was bilingual and I knew the culture, that I knew where the red lines were. Turns out I don't at all. And
Is that because the red lines had moved?
I'm sure they have. Not that I would have known what they were before, but many things tell me that they have the red lines have moved a lot closer to us. So,
so you did feel protected by your Australian citizenship as well?
No. I guess being a foreigner, I always felt that there was a certain amount of suspicion towards us. And in fact, I was told in court that they started monitoring me in April when I was arrested in August. And they said it was because I had been in frequent contact with foreign journalists. One version was foreign journalists, one version was Australian journalists. So one has to wonder why that would be cause for concern.
But they didn't go into any more detail than because you had been in contact with foreign journalists?
No, they didn't. And so that might be one of the red lines now.
And you were very careful on air always. You were more outspoken, particularly about the government's handling of COVID in private. Did you ever think that was part of your problem?
Maybe I had Stockholm syndrome. I believed what they told me was what I had done wrong. And to this day, I don't have the full picture.
I just want to go to the moment where it became clear to you that there was something wrong, which is you're summoned to the office. A member of the state security apparatus, I think you say, shows you his badge.
Yes.
Did you understand then exactly who you were dealing with and the risk, or not yet?
Not at all. I thought I could explain it. I thought I had done nothing wrong. You can check through everything. As Nick, my partner, can tell you, my passwords are all very easy and I don't screen lock anything. So I always thought I was just a very open person.
And you were still confident that you would come out the other side?
That's right. I thought I'd be back in maximum a few weeks.
So
I never saw my apartment again.
And I think at some point after that, Nick and your friend Hayes Fan came to your apartment. They obviously knew you weren't there, but your computer was gone, your passport was gone. Where had you been taken?
I was blindfolded and taken to a location which, when they had me sign documents, showed to be a certain address in Beijing, which was where they do this RSDL.
And let's explain what that is.
Yes. It's a residence under surveillance at a designated location. And it is a very sophisticated and subtle form of torture. While you are clothed and fed, you are warm, and you are safe, the safest you'll ever be, you are undergoing, I think, the utmost pain, emotionally, psychologically, and, of course, physically, if you're sitting there for 13 hours a day. So later I had just hurt everywhere because they wouldn't let me even walk around when I had a sore back. You had to apply for permission, and sometimes it would be denied. But that was the last month of RSDL. The first few months under the control of the case officers were a little better.
Just describe the immediate circumstances, what it looked like, what was around you, what it smelt like. What was it like?
Nothing. It was just padded beige cell with blue curtains and a single bed, very bare. You weren't you were not allowed to have anything of your own. For example, my toiletries were brought into me. The food was brought into me by the guards. I think they're terrified of self-harm and harm to others. And of course, should you try, escape, which I don't think anyone would. And you are watched at all times.
How are you watched?
One standing in front of you, 40 centimetres away, one sitting next to you, 40 centimetres away.
24 hours a day?
24 hours a day. They had 4 shifts. So 4 or maybe more, yeah. But I always used to think that they worked harder than I did, because imagine looking after or guarding someone like that, standing for hours.
Did they talk to you?
They're not allowed. I wasn't allowed to talk.
Are you questioned?
There were interrogations, yes.
Describe those.
Quite, what's the word? Intimidating. And the first night was very long, but the latter sessions weren't as long, because I don't think there was much there wasn't much they could dig up. And it was also satisfying to say something that totally negated their suspicions.
Did you understand what they were looking for? Was it clear what kind of a case they were trying to make against you?
Not at the time, because they made it sound that like everything was criminal. For example, a question might be, why did you go to such and such embassy? Well, I knew a lot of diplomatic people, and I had been trying to do a series on different embassies and their food. So
Something apparently harmless.
That's what I thought, yeah. But the interrogations were more about trying to get you to spit out everything that you know about everyone. And maybe sometimes they were confusing me. Maybe they wanted to make me feel guilty for everything. I'm not sure.
And did they make you write about yourself as well, or were you just subject to questioning?
Yes. The Chinese system likes to make you write about yourself, whether it's in school, in your employment, or in the judicial process.
And what were you asked to write?
Well, at first I thought I could just put down my real thoughts. And this was in October, 2 months after I was arrested. That was very naive, because now thinking back, if I had written, I am guilty and I accept punishment, maybe I could have been spared more months of the RSDL. One never knows, but that's what I suspect. So those 2 lines are what they're looking for.
And you're separated from friends and obviously out of contact with family. How afraid were you about losing contact with your family and not being able to tell them what was happening to you?
Well, I knew that because it was Nick's birthday, that the next day, that he would twig and know something was wrong as soon as he had gone to my apartment. And I knew that because I was given the opportunity to write to the embassy, I think that night, so I immediately wrote off a note to the ambassador, Graham Fletcher. It was more what's going to happen next that frightened me.
What were you most afraid of?
Death, life imprisonment, never seeing family again. And then later, when I knew there'd be a sentence, every time I woke up in the middle of the night, these numbers would jump at me. Like, such frightening numbers, like, what if it's 15 years? What if it's 10? And I wouldn't see my children until they were totally grown. I'd lose their growing up forever. And what about my parents? So, and that would just make me want to knock my head against the tiles and kill myself. And when I told the embassy staff that I had felt like that, which is totally true, I was berated by officers for they thought that I was, embellishing the truth.
Exaggerating.
Yeah. And I didn't know. I said, that's the truth. Very, very lame answer, but what can I say?
How did you, I think this is one of the hardest things, certainly for me to imagine, and I imagine for lots of people, is with that fear that you've just described. How do you control that fear and keep going? How do you manage not to be overwhelmed by it? Because it is overwhelming.
Yeah. Thankfully, I started getting books. At first, the officers would give me some Chinese books, and from November, I started getting the books that Nick brought, and they were a huge help. In RSDL, you could read anything, because imagine if the only colour that you see all day would be what's in the lunchbox. The only sounds you hear are the beep of the security door. You just draw on everything, anything, to inspire, to strengthen, to survive.
Did you know how long you could survive? Did you think about your own ability to survive in that situation?
I'd always been pretty tough. And after crises hit, I would reach a turning point. And for me, that was the end of October, when one night I suddenly thought, oh, I think tomorrow morning is such and such an officer on duty, and she's always nice and gets me a really delicious breakfast. And the moment I had that thought, I was very happy, because when you can look forward to something, even something as small as a breakfast, you can keep going no matter what.
And you could keep your mind, not lose your mind.
Yeah. And poetry, philosophy, science, all those things occupy your mind.
And did you think about your children or try not to think about them too much?
Both. I would dream about them. And the moment when you wake up, 1 minute, they're almost next to you. And you wake up and you see the guard's face. Yeah. But then you reach a point where you have to numb yourself and you have to think of the immediate now. For example, I'm going to do, well, not in RSDL, but later in detention. I'm going to do my exercises, and I'm now doing 50 squats. And for each squat, I'm going to think of a German verb or a Chinese poem.
So very disciplined.
Or the name of an American actor, for example.
Mental tricks or games.
Yes.
To keep your mind.
That's right.
Just come back to the charges. Well, when they first made clear what the charges are, how did they describe it to you?
Illegally supplying state secrets to foreign organizations.
Did they explain what that meant?
Not really, in terms of if you do this, then that is supplying a state secret, because even now, the gambit of a state secret is so wide. I cannot tell you what all of that is. Because my lawyer, for example, said there were cases of state companies' CEOs stationed overseas who had released, for example, data on their water usage. That could be considered a state secret.
Banal things.
Who would have thought?
Did they explain to you which particular events had caused them to charge you with that crime?
Yes.
And what did they tell you?
Well, they didn't tell me that was the only thing. They made it seem like everything was a state secret, which is why I was afraid of much harsher sentences.
And so, but were they specific about the particular trigger for the charges? I know there's been some discussion around breaking an embargo, but is that what it was about, or?
Well, that's what all of the interrogations were pretty much focused on, aside from the trying to get me to tell about other people and just asking all sorts of questions about my contacts.
Did you believe you had done something wrong?
Well, if somebody keeps bashing you over the head that you have, you will feel you have.
And did you come to believe that about yourself, that it was wrong?
Yes.
Do you still think that?
At the time, I justified it by because we share information, and as a journalist, this is how you. I thought I was being a good journalist.
But you now accept that it was, in China's terms, a crime?
Well, every country has different standards of what crime is.
Did you ever have to apologise for it?
Oh, yes. Plenty of times. Yeah.
Just go to the...
a lot of self-flagellation. Sorry.
What did that consist of?
Oh, just so-called having a good attitude. Yeah, so very docile and accepting all of everything that they say, never talking back.
You were moved into the prison system, is that the right way to describe it?
No, the detention centre.
You were moved into the detention centre from...
RSDL, which is next door.
Right, so it's not, you're just moved into a different part of the system.
That's right.
Now, at some point, you started receiving letters from your children. When was that?
Oh, I had messages from family from 2 weeks after I was put into RSDL. So I'd always had letters, but writing back, not only was everything censored, as in reviewed, but also it just took so long to get any replies that in the end I was so frustrated trying to get answers, a lot of miscommunication. Yeah.
And did your children's letters to you make you sad and happy?
Yes, precisely. I would smile at all the fun things they did, but then try to guess at perhaps Grandma had told them not to write about bad things that happened, and hearing about all those achievements, athletics and swimming, and not being there, and my daughter becoming a teenager, not being there, maybe bullied by other girls, not being there. Yeah.
Were you allowed to keep those letters with you?
No. You're given a few hours to read it, or half an hour in RSDL's case, and it had to be handed back.
That's particularly cruel.
Well, every piece of paper. For one thing, in RSDL, you cannot have anything in the cell. And then for another, in detention, every piece of paper is taken out, and every pen So I don't know how other prisons in other countries, people manage to write things and then smuggle it out. But
Can I ask you a strange question?
not at all.
Are you ashamed of what happened to you? Do you feel shame about it at all?
I did, but and I was afraid that my children would feel ashamed. But I think Australia has so showered me with kindness and faith in me that the shame is falling away. And my cellmates were constantly afraid that when they got out, because they're Chinese citizens, their children would suffer. They would be ostracised in school, and they wouldn't even be able to apply for certain jobs because of the state security taint. So I'm so lucky in that my children are actually proud that, oh, mummy was in the Australian newspaper.
And you survived?
Yes.
Just describe those circumstances in the second detention centre. What was it like? You're with people now.
I had to sign a gag order about the physical parts of the detention centre.
So you can't describe it?
No. But there were some reports that I couldn't stand up in the cell. That's wrong. Yeah, I definitely can. It was a lot better than RSDL.
Did you have a little space and a bed to yourself? Can I ask you that?
No, it was all slept together.
How was your health? How was your skin, your hair? How were you in this as the time went on?
Oh, you definitely feel it. The eyesight goes. At first you can read the subtitles, then it becomes blurry, then not much at all. And memory goes. You can't remember certain names, certain brands. So you always try to exercise your memory muscles. I tried to memorize all the countries in the world and the capitals, among other things.
And I'm moving forward towards the period of time where things are shifting. How was the decision to release you given to you?
I was given a heads up by the judge while waiting for the sentencing. He was smiling, and I still thought, what if it's not what I had hoped for? So when he actually read out the sentence, I mean, being in this job, I can do a good poker face, but inside I was just jumping up and down and just in utter ecstasy, disbelief. But it was very, very, very joyful.
Did you know it? You were sure it meant that you would be sent back to Australia, or just that you would be released?
The deportation charge was read out. So, and then...
Can you remember the words?
被判有期徒刑2年11个月，刑期执行到10月7日止，程磊将被驱逐出境。And that's it.
And which is the key part of that tells you it's over?
驱逐出境, deported.
Australia?
Yes.
And what was the gap between then and actually being on the plane?
About 2 weeks.
Were you afraid during that time that it could evaporate?
I was. And I was in a cell by myself. This is for fear of upsetting other cellmates, a decision by the detention centre. So I was pacing. I was full of nervous energy. I couldn't sleep. On the one hand, I was already fantasizing about the reunion. On the other, I kept thinking of things that could go wrong and how devastated I would be if they did. I was literally climbing the walls.
I want to ask you about China. You're born in China. You came to Australia as a child, but you were born in China. You're from China. Your parents are Chinese.
Yes.
How has this affected your bond with the country of your birth, with China?
It's a very, very strange feeling. And having read so much in detention, the whole idea of national identity is almost wrong in that what is a country? Because then that is associated with regimes and policies and other confusing things. But we can love a place, we can love family, we can love our memories, and that'll never change for China or for Australia. But it's so, what's the word? It's been shocking to see the difference in how people react to what happened to me in China and in Australia. Because in Australia, I've been cared for, helped, hugged on the street. People give me well wishes in the supermarket. And online, people say such nice things, undeservedly nice things about me. And in China, the level of, I don't know if it's trolls or bots, but even if there were trolls or bots, you'd have to think what enables them or what drives them to have bots, have trolls that say such vile things.
Does it hurt you?
It's so vile that I almost don't feel anything.
And this is saying you've betrayed China?
Oh, that I deserve to die 800 times and I need to be skinned alive and flayed and you can imagine the rest. And calling me a slut.
Will you ever
without knowing me or anything about me at all.
Would you ever go back to China?
It's very hard to answer that question. As I said, what is a country? Yeah, it's made up of, for the scenery, for the food, for the people, in a heartbeat. But a country has other things attached to it. And Australia has just been so kind to me that living here is the best part.
Cheng Lei, thank you very, very much indeed for
Thank you for having
talking
me.
to me. Thank you.